The initial months in the new town proved to be challenging for Precious. Wherever she went, she could hear whispers behind her, and some individuals pointed at her belly while others shook their heads in disapproval. They perceived a young woman who was pregnant and alone, hastily forming judgments without understanding her background. In a small town in Zambia, Precious's story began in sorrow. She was merely a baby when she was abandoned on the steps of an orphanage, with no one aware of her parentage. The compassionate nun who managed the orphanage provided her with a warm bed, meals, and clothing, yet it often felt devoid of the essence of a true home. Surrounded by other children, Precious frequently felt isolated. She would observe her peers playing, chatting, and laughing, but deep down, she yearned for something greater, a family of her own. She longed for parents who would love her, care for her, and make her feel cherished. Although the orphanage was not a terrible place, and the nuns endeavored to provide the best care, teaching the children to read, write, and behave politely while always wearing smiles, Precious would still lie in bed each night, dreaming of the day she would finally have parents. She wished to no longer feel different. When Precious turned 15, an unexpected turn of events occurred one afternoon. A couple named Chiku and Cla visited the orphanage. Married for 10 years, they had been unable to conceive a child of their own. As they surveyed the children, their gaze fell upon Precious, who stood somewhat apart from the others. There was something about her that touched Chiku and Cla's hearts. After conversing with the nuns, they decided to adopt Precious. When she received the news, she could hardly believe it, her heart swelled with joy. At last, she was going to have a family of her own. On the day she left the orphanage, she grasped Cla's hands tightly, her eyes sparkling with hope. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling as though her life was finally about to become as wonderful as she had always envisioned. Initially, everything seemed perfect. Chiku and Cla were kind and nurturing. Precious had been gifted with new clothes, enjoyed her favorite meals, and even enrolled in a new school. For an entire year, she cherished her new life, feeling as though she had finally discovered the family she had always longed for. However, one day, Cla returned home with significant news: she was pregnant. Precious felt a surge of happiness for them, clapping her hands in excitement, yet she was unaware that this announcement would alter everything. When Cla gave birth to a healthy baby girl, all the affection and attention shifted towards their newborn. The baby quickly became the focal point of their lives, with Chu and Cla lavishing her with the finest clothes, toys, and food. They were perpetually occupied with caring for her, gradually neglecting Precious. The smiles that were once directed at her were now reserved solely for their daughter. Precious endeavored to be understanding. She completed her chores, assisted with the baby, and kept to herself. Unfortunately, the situation only deteriorated. Soon, Chu and Cla began to treat her differently, assigning her additional responsibilities such as cleaning the house and doing laundry. "Look at you, you're older now, Precious, you need to help more," they would say. Yet, Precious sensed a shift in their tone. It was no longer a request, but an expectation. She was no longer the cherished child they once adored. Instead, she had become more akin to a servant within the household. Each day, she scrubbed the floors, prepared meals, and watched over their baby, feeling increasingly invisible, like a mere shadow in the corner of the room. The love she once received from them had vanished, replaced by indifference and harsh words. One evening, as Precious sat quietly in her room, she could hear Chu and Cla laughing and playing with their daughter in the living room. Tears welled in her eyes as she pondered, "Why don't they love me anymore?" She wiped her tears and attempted to remain strong, but her heart felt heavy. She longed for the days when they would embrace her, share stories, and make her feel like she truly belonged. Though uncertain about her future, Precious clung to one belief: she would have to carve out her own path. Deep within, she still nurtured the hope that one day, she would once again be loved. The once cherished life of Precious in Chiku and Cla's household deteriorated with each passing year. The couple ceased to support her education, citing financial constraints as the reason for their decision. Precious transformed from a joyful and hopeful girl into a servant within the very home that had once embraced her with love. Each morning, she rose before dawn to begin her daily tasks, scrubbing floors, washing clothes, and preparing meals for the family. Despite her relentless efforts, she faced constant criticism. "Why is this floor still dirty?" Chiku would demand, his gaze filled with disappointment whenever her work fell short of his expectations. "You should be grateful we even took you in," he would frequently remind her. Isolated and friendless, Precious was denied the simple joys of childhood, such as playing or resting. Instead, she was confined to household chores. When the daughter created a mess, it was Precious who bore the burden of cleaning it. If the baby cried at night, it was Precious who had to wake up and soothe her back to sleep. "Do your job right," CLA would instruct, handing her the crying infant without a hint of compassion. As the years went by, the house felt more like a prison to Precious. She had no companions and no one to confide in. The only moments of respite came when she took on odd jobs around the town to earn a small amount of money. She would wash clothes for neighbors or tend to their yards, seeking an escape from the confines of her home and the endless labor it demanded. One particularly sweltering afternoon, after hours spent under the sun cleaning a yard, Precious accidentally knocked over a vase in the living room while moving furniture. The vase shattered into countless pieces, prompting CLA to rush into the room, her face contorted with rage. "How dare you break my vase?" she screamed, her voice reverberating throughout the house. "Do you even realize how much that cost?" Chiku joined in, declaring, "You are a foolish girl, nothing but a burden to this household." His words struck Precious with the weight of a stone. Tears welled in her eyes as she crouched to gather the shattered fragments. Her hands trembled, yet she remained silent, having learned long ago that voicing her feelings would only exacerbate her situation. That night, as Precious lay on the thin mattress in her modest room, she realized she could no longer endure the pain. At 18, her body and heart had reached their limits, she needed to escape. Quietly, she packed her few belongings, a faded dress, a pair of worn shoes, and the little money she had saved from her previous job. Her heart raced as she tiptoed through the house, fearful that Cho or CLE might awaken, but the home was enveloped in silence. With one last look at the place that had caused her so much suffering, she slipped into the night. The streets were dark and still as she walked away from the only home she had ever known. Uncertain of her destination, she understood that looking back was not an option. After hours of walking, dawn broke, revealing Precious standing at the edge of a bustling city. The streets buzzed with the sounds of people, cars, and vendors calling out to passers-by. The city was a stark contrast to the small town of her upbringing, feeling vast and intimidating. For several days, Precious roamed the streets in search of work, knocking on doors to inquire if anyone needed assistance with cleaning or cooking, but she was met with rejection each time. "Don't need anyone," they would say, shutting the door in her face. Her meager savings quickly dwindled, leaving her with nothing. Hunger gnawed at her stomach as the days passed, and for 2 weeks, she found herself sleeping on the streets, her body weary and frail. Each night, she questioned whether leaving had been the right decision, yet she knew returning was not an option. Just when Precious felt she could endure no more, she encountered a compassionate woman named Auntie Soy. Auntie Soy had observed Precious wandering the streets and offered her a small job cleaning her home. Precious dedicated herself to the work, and Auntie Soy was impressed by her diligence. She diligently cleaned and prepared meals. "Do you have anywhere else to stay, my dear Auntie Soy?" she inquired one day, noticing how exhausted Precious appeared. "No, Mama," Precious replied softly. Auntie Soy shook her head, feeling sympathy for the young girl. "I know someone who might be in need of a maid, a wealthy young man who is seeking assistance. Would you be interested in working for him?" Precious's heart filled with hope. "Yes, Ma, I would," she responded with a warm smile. "Good. I will speak to him on your behalf. I believe this could be the beginning of something better for you, Precious," she added, holding back tears of relief. Perhaps, just perhaps, her circumstances were about to improve. William, the affluent young man, resided in one of the most opulent mansions in the city, a place so grand and filled with wealth that many would dream of living there. However, despite his riches, William was a solitary figure. Over the years, his heart had grown cold as he surrounded himself with individuals who sought only his money and influence. He had learned to trust no one. When Auntie Sway recommended Precious for the position, William barely acknowledged her upon her arrival. To him, she was merely another employee, someone to clean and remain out of his way. Yet for Precious, this represented a fresh start. After enduring so much pain and hardship, she finally found herself in an environment where she could work and live in peace. Grateful for the opportunity, Precious dedicated herself to her tasks, rising early each morning to ensure every corner of the mansion was immaculate. She took great care to make the floors shine, the windows gleam, and the meals perfectly prepared. William rarely engaged with her, and that was acceptable to Precious. She was simply content to have a roof over her head and food to eat. The mansion, while magnificent, was also eerily quiet. William spent the majority of his days in his office or away on business trips. He possessed everything: luxurious cars, expensive clothing, and fine art adorning his walls, but inside, he felt hollow. He had no family and no genuine friends. Those around him were pretentious and only valued him for his wealth, not for who he was. For an entire year, Precious lived and worked in that grand estate. In the mansion, she maintained a low profile, striving to steer clear of any complications. William observed how distinct she was compared to others. She made no attempts to impress him or seek additional favors. She was simply present, diligently performing her duties. One evening, after an especially taxing day, William found himself alone in the expansive grand dining room, which, despite its capacity to accommodate 20 guests, felt more desolate than ever. As Precious cleared the table, William broke his silence for the first time in months. "Precious, do you ever grow weary of this?" he inquired, his tone softer than usual. Precious paused, taken aback by his address. "Getting tired of what, sir?" she responded cautiously. "Of life being the same every day," William replied, surveying the emptiness of his home. "Doesn't it feel lonely?" After a moment of reflection, Precious answered, "I suppose it does, but I've endured worse." She spoke candidly. "At least here, I have a job, a place to stay, and no one to harm me." William fell silent, contemplating her words. He had never considered the nature of her life prior to her arrival. He was unaware of her struggles and the pain she had endured. To him, she had merely been a maid, a worker in his household. However, as he listened to her, he began to recognize that she was much more than he had initially perceived. As time passed, William found himself increasingly aware of Precious. She was unlike those he was accustomed to, individuals who sought his company solely for his wealth. Precious was genuine and industrious, never voicing complaints about her responsibilities. She evoked a sense of honesty in him that he had not experienced in a long time. One afternoon, while Precious was dusting the living room, William sat on the couch and observed her for a while. "You've been here for a year, haven't you?" he asked unexpectedly. "Yes, sir," Precious replied, continuing her work without interruption. "You never ask for anything, and you don't complain." "Why is that?" he inquired, intrigued. Precious paused, turning to face him. "Because I know what it's like to have nothing, sir," she replied simply. "I am grateful." William nodded, gaining a deeper understanding of her than he had ever possessed before. As time progressed, their interactions increased. Initially, these exchanges were minimal, consisting of simple morning greetings or brief discussions about household matters. However, as the weeks unfolded, their dialogues became more extensive and profound. William, who had previously maintained a cold and distant demeanor, began to find solace in Precious's company. She was the sole individual in his life who did not regard him merely as a source of financial support. She neither flattered him nor sought to gain anything from him. She was genuine. One evening, after a long day, William and Precious found themselves in the kitchen together. After pouring himself a drink, he unexpectedly offered her one as well. She hesitated momentarily but ultimately accepted, taking a seat across from him. "You are different from everyone I know," William remarked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I do not feel alone when I am with you." Precious was taken aback, unsure of how to respond. She had never anticipated such sentiments from a man like William, and a whirlwind of emotions, surprise, confusion, and an indescribable feeling, washed over her. Gradually, their relationship began to evolve. What had commenced as casual exchanges transformed into profound connections, and before long, they found themselves intertwined in a manner neither had foreseen. Yet, this bond remained a secret, one they both recognized could alter everything. Precious felt apprehensive. Having emerged from a life of hardship, she now faced an unforeseen situation. She pondered whether this new path might lead to a better existence or if it was merely another twist of fate poised to bring her down once more. For weeks, Precious had sensed a change within herself. She felt fatigued, dizzy, and inexplicably joyful. When she realized she had missed her monthly cycle, the truth dawned on her: she was pregnant. Initially, fear gripped her heart, but as she sat alone in her modest room, a quiet joy began to blossom within her. The thought of becoming a mother filled her with happiness, and she envisioned a life where she, William, and their child would come together as a family. Freya resolved to share the news with William, believing he would feel joy, perhaps even excitement, given the special bond they had and the fact that they were expecting a child. She chose to wait until he returned home from work one evening. The mansion was as quiet as ever, and Freya stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she contemplated the best way to convey her message. When William finally entered, appearing weary and preoccupied, Freya summoned her courage. "William," she called softly. He looked up, slightly startled. "What is it, Precious?" he inquired. "I need to tell you something important," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, her heart racing as if it might escape her chest. William leaned against the kitchen counter, clearly not in the mood for a serious discussion. "What is it?" "I've had a long day," he said impatiently. Taking a deep breath, she announced, "I'm pregnant, William. We're going to have a baby." For a brief moment, silence enveloped the room. William's expression froze as her words registered, and he stared at her, speechless. Freya felt the weight of the silence grow heavier, her heart sinking as she discerned the look of panic on his face. "Pregnant?" William finally uttered, his tone icy and detached. "How could you let this happen?" Freya's heart sank further, but she managed to respond, "I thought you would be happy." Tears began to well in her eyes as she spoke. William shook his head, his gaze narrowing. "Happy? Precious, do you even grasp what you're saying? Do you understand the implications? I cannot have a child with you. What will people think? My reputation, my business, it will all be ruined." Freya stood there, stunned by his words. "But it's our baby," she whispered, her voice quivering. William stepped closer, his expression resolute. "No, Precious, this is your problem now. I cannot be involved in this. I cannot allow this baby to ruin my life." Freya gazed at him in disbelief, unable to comprehend his reaction. "William, please, we can raise the child together," she implored, tears now streaming down her cheeks. William's demeanor remained unyielding. He regarded her with an icy gaze, no longer recognizing the woman with whom he had shared so much. "You need to leave, Precious," he stated bluntly. "You cannot remain here any longer." "Where will I go?" she implored. "I have no one, William. I thought you cared for me." He turned away, presenting his back to her. "I cannot assist you, Precious. I need you out of my life now. Find somewhere else to go." It felt as though the ground had been ripped from beneath her. The man she had trusted, the one she believed might love her, was casting her aside, pregnant, heartbroken, and utterly alone. She gathered a few of her belongings, her mind clouded with disbelief. With no money, no family, and no one to turn to, she felt completely adrift as she exited the mansion for the final time. The grand residence, once her sanctuary, now felt like a prison from which she had been released, but not in a manner that brought her relief. She felt abandoned and discarded. With the little savings she had left, Precious boarded a bus to a distant small town. She did not care where she was headed, as long as it was far from William and the life she had known. The bus journey was lengthy, and Precious gazed out the window, watching the city recede into the distance. Each passing mile deepened the ache in her heart, the sting of William's betrayal fresh in her thoughts. Upon her arrival in the town, everything appeared foreign. The people were different, the streets quieter, and the air cooler. Precious found a small, dilapidated room to rent with her remaining funds. It was modest, but it provided a roof over her head. Alone in the cramped space, she sat on the bed, her hands resting on her abdomen. She felt a gentle flutter within and closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I will protect you," she whispered to her unborn child. "I won't allow anyone to hurt you the way I have been hurt." Yet, deep down, Precious understood that the path ahead would be challenging. With no one to depend on but herself, she felt apprehensive about the future. However, for the sake of her child, she resolved to persevere. The initial months in the new town proved to be challenging. Wherever she went, people murmured behind her back, some pointed at her abdomen, while others shook their heads in disapproval. They perceived a young woman who was pregnant and alone, hastily judging her without understanding her circumstances. The pressure compelled her to keep her head down, feigning ignorance to the stares and whispers. She was resolute in her determination to persevere for the sake of her child, knowing that she could not allow their words to undermine her spirit. Each morning, she rose early to seek employment, accepting any job, no matter how menial. She cleaned homes, repaired garments, and assisted market vendors with heavy loads. Every coin she earned was saved for her baby. The days were long, and at times, she felt the urge to surrender. Her back ached from the burdens she carried, and her heart still ached from William's betrayal. Yet, whenever she felt weak, she placed her hand on her growing belly and reminded herself of her purpose. "I will provide you with a better life," she whispered to her unborn child. "You will never feel unwanted as I once did." One day, while working at the market, an older woman named Mama Muo took notice of Precious's diligent efforts. Having observed Precious's struggles for months, she admired her resilience. "You work too hard, my dear," Mama Muo said gently as Precious wiped the sweat from her brow. Precious offered a faint smile, replying, "I have to, Mama. I need to care for my baby." Mama Muo nodded, her eyes softening. "You are a strong girl, do not let these people bring you down. I see your heart, and it is a good one." From that moment on, Mama Muo treated Precious with kindness, assisting her in finding more work and even providing her with extra food from her market stall. Gradually, some of the other women in town began to warm up to Precious as well. They recognized her hard work and kindness, leading them to respect her. As months passed, Precious's baby was nearing the time to enter the world. One quiet night, she felt the first pangs of labor while alone in her small room. Clutching her stomach in fear, she felt the pain intensify, and she understood that the moment had come. With trembling hands, she gathered her belongings and hurried to Mama Mua's house, hoping for assistance. Mama Mua quickly took her to the local midwife, and after hours of labor, Precious gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Tears of relief and joy filled her eyes as she cradled her son for the first time. He was small, with soft brown eyes that sparkled with a brightness that seemed to penetrate her very soul. "What will you name him?" Mama Mua inquired gently, sitting beside her. Precious gazed down at her baby and smiled. "Ezra," she whispered, "his name is Ezra." From that moment on, Precious's life took on a new significance. Ezra became her everything. She devoted every waking moment to caring for him, feeding him, and watching him grow. As the months went by, Ezra became the focal point of her existence. His laughter brought light to her eyes and joy to her heart, making all of Precious's struggles feel worthwhile. Despite their limited means, the love she had for Ezra filled their small home with warmth. She worked tirelessly, doing whatever was necessary to provide for her son. There were days when her own meals were scarce, but she always ensured that Ezra was well fed, willing to go hungry if it meant he had what he needed. Precious's determination and love did not go unnoticed. The townspeople began to admire her for the way she raised Ezra. Even those who had once spoken ill of her began to show her kindness, recognizing her strength. As Ezra grew older, he became a lively and curious boy, spreading joy wherever he went. He enjoyed playing with the other children in the town, and although they had little, Precious made sure he was always clean and well-dressed, mending old fabrics to create new clothes by hand. One evening, as Precious watched Ezra play outside their modest home, she felt a profound sense of peace. Life was not easy, but having her son was all that truly mattered. "We will be all right," she whispered to herself, smiling as Ezra ran toward her, holding a flower he had picked. "Here, Mama," he said. With enthusiasm, she lifted the small flower to her cherished child. Kneeling down, she accepted the flower from his tiny hand. "Thank you, Ezra, it's beautiful," she said, embracing him tightly. In that moment, Precious realized that regardless of the challenges life presented, she would always possess the strength to persevere. She had made a vow to herself and to Ezra that he would never experience the anguish of abandonment. As the years passed, Ezra blossomed into an intelligent and inquisitive young boy. Precious dedicated herself to numerous jobs to ensure they had food and clothing. Despite her long hours, she consistently found time to impart essential lessons to Ezra. "You must work hard, Ezra, but remember to be kind to others," she would advise him as she tucked him in at night. Ezra listened intently to his mother's words, admiring her resilience and never voicing complaints about their modest means. The warmth of Precious's love filled their home, and her tireless efforts instilled in Ezra the importance of perseverance. At school, he consistently ranked at the top of his class. While other children played, Ezra focused on his studies, determined to make his mother proud. His teachers frequently remarked on his dedication and concentration. "Ezra is exceptional," they would tell Precious during parent-teacher conferences. "He is intelligent and works harder than anyone else in the class." Each time she heard those words, Precious felt a swell of pride. Although she could not afford extravagant school supplies or books, Ezra never requested more than she could provide. He utilized old, second-hand textbooks and borrowed pencils from classmates, yet he never allowed these limitations to hinder his academic success. Precious recognized that her sacrifices were worthwhile as she witnessed Ezra's progress despite the obstacles they had encountered. One day, during Ezra's final year of high school, an unexpected event occurred. The school principal summoned him to the office, leaving Ezra anxious, wondering if he had done something wrong. "Ezra, I have wonderful news for you," the principal announced with a broad smile. "Due to your hard work and outstanding grades, you have been awarded a scholarship that will cover your expenses." University education's significance became apparent as Ezra's eyes widened in disbelief upon hearing the news. "A scholarship?" he asked, struggling to comprehend the information. "Yes, Ezra," the principal confirmed. "This scholarship will enable you to study in the city at one of the finest universities." Unable to contain his joy, Ezra rushed home after school, bursting through the door. "Mama, Mama, Mama! You won't believe what just happened," he exclaimed. Precious, startled by her son's enthusiasm, responded, "What is it, Ezra? What's going on?" "I got a scholarship. I got a scholarship," Ezra declared, his face glowing with happiness. "They are sending me to the university in the city, and it's all covered." Precious stood in astonishment, tears welling in her eyes. She dropped the spoon she was holding and hurried to embrace Ezra tightly. "Oh, Ezra, I am so proud of you," she said, her voice trembling. "You have worked so hard, and now all your efforts have paid off." Ezra held his mother close, feeling the depth of her love and pride. "It's because of you, Mama. You've always supported me, and I want to make you proud." Precious wiped her tears and smiled. "You already have, Ezra. You have made me the happiest mother in the world." The days leading up to Ezra's departure were filled with excitement, yet tinged with sadness. Precious felt proud, but the thought of her only son moving to the big city caused her heart to ache. She assisted him in packing his belongings, folding each item with care. "You will do great, Ezra," she said, trying to conceal her tears. "Just remember everything I taught you, work hard, be kind, and never forget where you come from." "I promise, Mama, I'll make sure to visit as often as I can." Finally, the day arrived for Ezra to leave for the city. Precious and Ezra stood at the bus stop, waiting for the bus that would take him to his new life. Her hands trembled as she held his. She had always been strong, but the reality of Ezra's departure felt overwhelming. "Mama, don't worry," Ezra reassured her, sensing her anxiety. "I will come back, and I will make you even prouder." Precious managed a smile, though it was forced. Misty-eyed, she nodded as tears filled her gaze. "I know you will, Ezra. Just promise me you will take care of yourself." When the bus arrived, Ezra embraced his mother one final time before boarding. As the bus began to move, he looked through the window, watching her figure diminish in the distance. His heart ached at the thought of leaving her behind, yet he understood that he was making the right choice. This was an opportunity to create a better future for both of them, and he was determined not to let it pass him by. She stood there for a long time, watching until the bus was out of sight. Wiping her tears, she whispered, "Go and make your dreams come true, Ezra. I will always be here waiting for you at the university." Ezra flourished in his studies, focusing on business and economics, always mindful of his mother's sacrifices. His dedication did not go unnoticed. During a university event, he met Damien, a distinguished businessman who recognized Ezra's intelligence and ambition. "So, young man, what are your plans after university?" Damien inquired, his gaze fixed on Ezra with keen interest. Feeling a mix of nerves and confidence, Ezra responded, "I want to start my own business and support my mother. She has given up so much for me, and I wish to repay her." Damien smiled, saying, "I see great potential in you, Ezra. With the right mentorship, you could achieve far more than you envision." From that moment on, Damien took Ezra under his wing, assisting him in securing internships and connecting with influential individuals. Ezra admired Damien's accomplishments and was grateful for his guidance. Over time, Damien evolved from a mentor into a father figure for Ezra. During school breaks, Ezra would return home to visit his mother, often sharing stories of Damien's support. She expressed her gratitude for Damien's kindness and extended invitations for dinner whenever Ezra was home. When Damien first visited their house, she welcomed him with a warm smile, saying, "Thank you for everything you have done for Ezra, it means the world." Damien arranged for her to marry with a chul. "Oh. It is of no significance, Ezra is a commendable young man, and I take pleasure in assisting him." As time went on, Damien and Precious developed a closer bond. They engaged in conversations during dinner, and gradually, Damien began to perceive more than just a diligent and resilient mother in Precious. He recognized a kind and gentle woman who had selflessly devoted everything to her son, often without realizing it. Eventually, Damien found himself falling in love with her. One day, Ezra observed a change in Damien's behavior around his mother. He noticed the way Damien gazed at her with tenderness and a warm smile. "Damien, do you have feelings for my mother?" Ezra inquired directly, catching Damien off guard. After a brief pause, Damien confessed, "Yes, Ezra, I do. I care deeply for your mother, and I am serious about her, but I would never act without your approval." Ezra contemplated for a moment. He recognized that Damien was a good man and desired his mother's happiness, so he resolved to assist. "I will support you, but you must treat her well," Ezra stated with a smile. Damien expressed his gratitude for Ezra's backing, promising, "I assure you, Ezra, I will cherish her with all the love and respect she deserves." In the following weeks, Ezra orchestrated small surprises for his mother and Damien, encouraging them to spend more time together. He suggested they take walks after dinner or sit together while he studied. Gradually, Precious began to take notice. One evening, while washing the dishes, Precious asked her son, "Ezra, why are you trying to bring me and Damien together?" Ezra set down his book and looked at her earnestly. "Mama, you have devoted so many years to caring for me, always putting me first. Now it is time for you to seek your own happiness. Damien is a good man, and he genuinely cares for you." Precious pondered Ezra's words, her thoughts drifting back to William, the man who had deserted her when she needed him most. She had vowed never to trust another wealthy man. Yet, she considered Damien, kind, supportive Damien, who had consistently been there for her and Ezra. "I don't know." Ezra expressed his fears, stating that he did not wish to experience pain again. Persis, understanding his concerns, reassured him. Ezra gently responded, noting that Damien was different. He had consistently supported them and genuinely cared for Persis. He encouraged her to give him a chance. That night, Persis remained awake, contemplating her situation. She feared the prospect of being alone indefinitely and considered the possibility of reopening her heart. The following morning, she resolved to give Damien an opportunity. Their relationship began gradually, with Damien treating Persis with kindness and affection, ensuring she felt appreciated and respected. He took her on simple outings, such as strolls in the park and intimate dinners, which rekindled feelings of happiness within her that had long been dormant. Ezra observed their growing bond with a smile, pleased that his mother had found someone who could bring joy back into her life. As Ezra approached the conclusion of his university studies, he focused on establishing his own small business. Although it started modestly, his determination, coupled with Damien's mentorship, led to rapid growth. Soon, investors began to take notice of his efforts. With the expansion of his business, Ezra purchased a spacious home in the city and relocated his mother there, allowing her and Damien to spend more time together. Life was finally looking promising for both Ezra and Persis as they prepared for the next phase of their lives. William's life had transformed significantly since he had sent Persis away. He had built a successful business and accumulated wealth over the years. During this time, he met Mandy, a woman of similar social standing, and they eventually became engaged. Initially, everything appeared perfect. However, as William spent more time with Mandy, he recognized that their connection was not as profound as the one he had shared with Persis. He reassured himself that Mandy embodied everything he was supposed to desire, given their shared background. Yet, deep down, William sensed that something essential was lacking. Unlike Persis, Mandy did not listen to him in the same way. Persis had shown genuine care for him, even without a deep understanding of the business world. William sought advice, comfort, and support whenever he required it. However, Mandy seemed more preoccupied with parties and social status. Despite his reservations, William persevered with his life until circumstances took a turn for the worse. A series of poor investments left his business in jeopardy, and he found himself in a state of desperation. He exhausted every possible solution to rectify the situation, but to no avail. One evening, as he sat at his desk poring over financial reports, his hands trembled upon realizing the gravity of his predicament. A once thriving enterprise was on the brink of collapse. He needed assistance, and he believed Mandy would understand. After all, she was his fiancée. However, when he confided in her about his troubles, her response was far from what he anticipated. She regarded him with a cold demeanor, devoid of any empathy. "We should dissolve our engagement," Mandy stated bluntly. "I cannot be with a man who is on the verge of bankruptcy. I require someone who can sustain my lifestyle." With that, she departed, leaving William in despair. He reflected on Precious, recalling how she had supported him during difficult times, always providing a shoulder to lean on. He had let her go due to his pride and desire for social standing, and now he found himself utterly alone. William shook his head, determined not to surrender. He was not prepared to lose everything. Fueled by desperation, he began searching for investors to salvage his business. One afternoon, while reviewing potential partners in his office, his assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, I have found someone you may wish to meet," the assistant announced, presenting a file. His name is Ezra Castom, a young entrepreneur who has been making significant waves in the business sector. He could potentially assist you. William readily agreed to a meeting, and they arranged to convene at an upscale restaurant. On the day of the meeting, William entered the establishment feeling a mix of anxiety and optimism. As he took his seat, he sensed a familiarity about the young man across from him. William sought advice, comfort, and support whenever he required it. However, Mandy seemed more preoccupied with parties and social status. Despite his reservations, William persevered with his life until circumstances took a turn for the worse. A series of poor investments left his business in jeopardy, and he found himself in a state of desperation. He exhausted every possible solution to rectify the situation, but to no avail. One evening, as he sat at his desk poring over financial reports, his hands trembled upon realizing the gravity of his predicament. A once thriving enterprise was on the brink of collapse. He needed assistance, and he believed Mandy would understand. After all, she was his fiancée. However, when he confided in her about his troubles, her response was far from what he anticipated. She regarded him with a cold demeanor, devoid of any empathy. "We should dissolve our engagement," Mandy stated bluntly. "I cannot be with a man who is on the verge of bankruptcy. I require someone who can sustain my lifestyle." With that, she departed, leaving William in despair. He reflected on Precious, recalling how she had supported him during difficult times, always providing a shoulder to lean on. He had let her go due to his pride and desire for social standing, and now he found himself utterly alone. William shook his head, determined not to surrender. He was not prepared to lose everything. Fueled by desperation, he began searching for investors to salvage his business. One afternoon, while reviewing potential partners in his office, his assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, I have found someone you may wish to meet," the assistant announced, presenting a file. "His name is Uzra Castom, a young entrepreneur who has been making significant waves in the business sector. He could potentially assist you." William readily agreed to a meeting, and they arranged to convene at an upscale restaurant. On the day of the meeting, William entered the establishment feeling a mix of anxiety and optimism. As he took his seat, he sensed a familiarity about the young man across from him. William dismissed the thought and concentrated on the business at hand. "Thank you for meeting with me," he began. Uzra replied, "I've heard wonderful things about you and your work." With a polite smile, Uzra responded, "It is an honor, Mr. William. I have worked diligently to reach this point, and my mother has played a significant role in my journey." The mention of Uzra's mother piqued William's interest. Throughout their discussion, Uzra spoke affectionately of her, revealing the deep love and respect he held for her. "My mother always advised me to remain true to myself, no matter the circumstances," Uzra stated. "She has endured much, yet she never lost hope." William felt a surge of curiosity. "She sounds like an extraordinary woman. What is her name?" Uzra smiled once more. "Her name is Precious." William felt a jolt of recognition. Could it be the same Precious? He refrained from voicing his thoughts. As their meeting concluded, Uzra's phone rang, and his expression brightened. "Hi, Mom," Uzra greeted cheerfully. "Oh, you're at the restaurant too? Wonderful. I will meet you outside shortly." Turning to William, Uzra added, "My mom and her friend are here, but they are in a different room. We can leave together, and you can meet her if you wish." William nodded, feeling an inexplicable urge to meet this woman. He stood beside Uzra as they waited near the entrance of the restaurant. Moments later, Uzra called out, "Mom, over here." William turned to see a woman approaching, and he was momentarily breathless. It was Precious, the woman he had parted ways with all those years ago. She appeared even more beautiful and radiant than he remembered. Accompanying her were two handsome men. "Precious," William said, and when she recognized him, she halted in her tracks, disbelief evident on her face. Uzra looked between them, puzzled. "Do you know each other?" Precious took a deep breath and addressed her son. "Ezra, this man is your father." The revelation struck Ezra like a thunderbolt. "What?" he whispered, stepping back, his gaze shifting from Precious to William, anger flashing in his eyes. "How could you?" Ezra shouted, glaring at William, "How could you just leave us?" Ezra felt a deep sense of turmoil as he distanced himself from both his mother, Precious, and William. Precious reached out to him, but he merely shook his head and walked away, leaving them behind. Heartbroken, Precious hurried after him, witnessing the pain etched on her son's face. Meanwhile, William stood frozen, confronted by the ghosts of his past, left alone to grapple with the consequences of his actions. As Ezra drove home, fury coursed through him, his thoughts consumed by the struggles his mother endured while raising him alone. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, recalling the shocking moment he learned that William, the man he had looked up to in business, was actually his father, the same man who had cast his mother aside upon discovering her pregnancy. Upon arriving home, he found Precious waiting for him, her expression calm and loving as always. "Mom, how could you not tell me?" Ezra asked, his voice quivering with frustration. "He threw you out, he didn't care about us at all." "I know, Ezra," Precious replied gently, placing her hand on his shoulder. "But harboring anger won't alter the past. Look at where we are now, we are happy, and that is what truly matters." Ezra paced the room, unable to dispel the anger that lingered within him. "But Mom, he didn't just leave, he made you leave knowing you were pregnant. You sacrificed everything for me, and he never cared." Precious smiled softly, her eyes radiating warmth. "I won't pretend it didn't hurt back then, but we persevered. And now, I have something to share with you." Her face lit up as she spoke. "Damien proposed to me, Ezra. We're getting married." Ezra's anger dissipated at the news, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Wow, Mom, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. Damien is a wonderful man, and he will make you truly happy." Precious nodded, her smile growing brighter. "He already has." However, that night, as Ezra lay in bed, sleep eluded him. His thoughts kept returning to William. He pondered why William had chosen to cast them out, all in the name of preserving his reputation. Was there more to the story? Why had William never attempted to find them? The weight of unanswered questions burdened him, and he realized he could not simply dismiss them. Therefore, the following morning, Ezra resolved to confront his feelings. He would not allow his anger to consume him indefinitely. He needed clarity regarding his father's abandonment of their family without informing his mother. Ezra proceeded directly to William's office. Upon his arrival, he entered without knocking. William, startled by Ezra's sudden appearance, looked up from his desk, his expression reflecting surprise and concern. Ezra's face was etched with frustration as he interrupted William, demanding answers. "Why did you expel my mother from your home? Why did you abandon her while she was pregnant with me?" Ezra's voice was sharp, filled with indignation. A knot formed in William's stomach as he met his son's gaze, recognizing the pain and fury within it. He sighed heavily, the weight of guilt pressing down on him. "I was a coward, Ezra," he admitted quietly. "I was more concerned about my reputation than the woman I loved and the child she was to bear. I thought it would be easier to protect myself by pushing her away, and I regret that decision every single day." Ezra's eyes burned with resentment. "So, you discarded her as if she were insignificant, as if I were insignificant?" William lowered his head in shame, his heart heavy. "I was wrong. I was young and made a grave mistake. I allowed my pride and fear of judgment to dictate my actions. While I cannot change the past, I can seek your forgiveness." Ezra paused, his emotions swirling within him. He recalled his mother's teachings about forgiveness and moving forward. Deep down, he understood that clinging to anger would ultimately harm him. Taking a deep breath, he addressed William. "I cannot erase what you did, but I am willing to give you an opportunity to make amends, not for your sake, but for my own." Tears welled in William's eyes as he responded, "Thank you, Ezra. Thank you. I will do whatever it takes to regain your trust." Gradually, Ezra began to allow William back into his life. They spent time together engaging in conversations about their past and fostering a relationship that had previously been absent. William felt a deep sense of gratitude for the chance to be involved in his son's life, even if it had come at a later stage. Meanwhile, the bond between Precious and Damien flourished as they made preparations for their wedding. True to her forgiving nature, Precious extended a wedding invitation to William. Upon receiving the invitation, William's heart sank. He recognized that, despite Precious's kindness, he had forfeited the opportunity to be an integral part of her life. The invitation served as a poignant reminder of all that he had relinquished. On the day of the wedding, Precious looked radiant in her gown, exuding happiness as she walked down the aisle alongside Damien. William observed from a distance, his heart weighed down by regret, realizing that he had lost something invaluable long ago, and that no amount of apologies could amend the past. Nevertheless, he felt thankful to witness her joy. Following the wedding, Precious and Damien led a fulfilling life, engaging in charitable work and inspiring young individuals with their love and commitment. Ezra continued to expand his business and eventually discovered true love as well, marrying a lovely woman named Monica and welcoming 3 beautiful children, 2 sons and a daughter. Although William had missed his opportunity with Precious, he was resolute in not missing out on his grandchildren's lives. He embraced the role of a devoted grandfather, ensuring he was present for them in ways he had not been for Ezra. Ultimately, Precious, Damien, and Ezra enjoyed a life filled with happiness, love, and success. Thank you for watching. If you appreciated the story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more captivating stories like this one. I would also love to hear your thoughts on the story in the comments. Until next time, stay tuned for my next video. God bless you, and goodbye.